A wide street, bathed in the soft light of late afternoon, ran through the neighborhood where Jason Statham had taken his first steps into the boxing world. He parked in front of a familiar building, a brick wall painted appealing red, with a sign that was almost faded and barely legible. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and the smell of sweat-soaked rubber carpet filled his nostrils, evoking memories of the very same scent he had once inhaled first thing in the morning before training. Inside were bulky exercise machines, a row of punching bags stretched to the side, and a ring with taut ropes towered in the center of the room. Everything seemed the same, but on closer inspection he noticed how much had changed. The walls were covered in fresh graffiti. Somewhere in the far corner there were new benches. But the main difference was that the air did not feel like the discipline and respect he remembered. Young men laughed loudly, exchanged barbs, periodically shouting something disrespectful at each other. Jason walked along the rows of punching bags. His memory immediately drew images. Once he, side by side with another such young boy, smashed his knuckles until they bled on the rough leather of these bags. He remembered how the trainer, a man with a prickly look but a kind heart, taught him how to hold his fists correctly, to dodge and not be afraid to strike. That time had long passed, but deep inside Statham felt that this was where his determination was born, his character, which became a support in his acting career and in many difficult situations in life. He approached the stand where achievements were usually displayed, photographs of champions, newspaper articles telling of the successes of local boys. He saw familiar black and white photos, one of himself, still a boy, with short hair, gloves in his hands, standing next to his coach. A frozen half-smile, full of pride and hope, was on his lips. Back then, it seemed like the whole world was at his feet. "It's incredible," he said quietly. "And so many years have passed." Suddenly he was noticed. Several young boxers, hanging around in a group, began to whisper. One of them thought he saw a familiar face, but then another, more cocky, said, "It's just some old man in a suit. Look at the way he's looking at everything, like he's in a museum." Laughter rolled through him in a wave. Jason tensed, feeling a mixture of irritation and slight sadness stir within him. Was he really going to be greeted like this in the hall where he had come with warmth? One of the older guys, with a tattoo on his neck, came closer and said contemptuously, "Why are you here, mister? Are you really trying to remember the old days? We can handle this ourselves without any old man's advice." There was obvious mockery in his voice. But Jason just sighed. He didn't know yet how much further these young bullies would go, but he already felt the need to do something to bring back the old spirit of sport, respect for elders and traditions to the hall. While Jason was thinking about how to react to the sneering looks, his eyes fell on an elderly man with a mop in his hands. He was just wiping up the water stains on the floor near the entrance. The man looked tired, his face was deeply wrinkled, but there was an unusual light in his eyes. It seemed like he was remembering something when he saw Statham. And suddenly, putting down his mop, the janitor called out, "Hey, is that you, Jason? I remember you, I remember you. You were that skinny guy who would disappear here for days." Statham turned around in surprise. At first he didn't immediately recognize his interlocutor, but after a few seconds his memory threw up a name: Henry, the same janitor and jack of all trades who had worked here back when the hall first opened. Henry smiled, although the smile was sad. "I'm glad to see you, boy. I see you've achieved a lot, become famous. And our hall, well, look at the atmosphere here. The old coaches have left, and the young people seem to be getting really cheeky." Henry's words confirmed what Jason had already noticed. While they were whispering, a modern coaching scene was unfolding nearby. Guys were discussing girls, bragging about their victories in local tournaments, and making barbs at any onlookers. It seemed that sports discipline had faded into the background. "I remember," Jason said quietly, nodding toward an empty chair against the wall. "This is where Coach Mr. Brown used to sit and watch your every move. It was considered that if he made a remark, you were lucky he believed that something good could come out of you." The cleaner Henry smiled bitterly. "Yes, Brown. He retired and was replaced by younger guys. But apparently they didn't adopt his approach. Now it's every man for himself, no cohesion, no respect for elders. Very sad. At that moment, a group of boxers burst out laughing. One of them, a strong guy with a short haircut, noticed that the janitor was talking to the old man, and made a hand gesture calling for attention. "Hey, you old man with a bald head," he shouted mockingly, looking at Jason. "What are you doing here, nostalgia? Maybe you want to show us a master class?" The others burst out laughing. Henry frowned and said in a low voice, "Don't pay any attention. They're always cheeky, they especially enjoy showing off to newcomers. But they don't recognize you, they don't watch movies, I guess." Jason, already feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline, just shrugged. He knew he wasn't here to put on a show or prove his toughness. But it hurt to see the gym he treated almost like a second home turn into a place of overconfident antics and lack of respect. "It's all right, Henry," he said quietly. "I'll see if I can help bring some sense into these guys." Off to the side, away from the laughter, Henry explained to Jason how it all happened. The old owner of the club, the respected Mr. Ramirez, retired and sold the gym to some entrepreneur who wasn't particularly keen on the sport but decided that the fighting theme was fashionable. Young trainers came in who didn't value the history of the place much, but knew how to put on a show and attract arrogant youngsters. Gradually, the old men began to leave, those who observed traditions and taught discipline. Now the gym resembled a gathering of arrogant, and sometimes rude guys who didn't understand the true spirit of boxing. And training is now mostly self-taught," Henry added, dejectedly stroking the sleeves of his faded jacket. "No one teaches you the correct technique, no one stands behind you to correct your mistakes. Just so long as it's cool and aggressive. The result is injuries, constant conflicts." Jason shook his head sympathetically. His own memories spoke of a different boxing world. Respect the ring, your partner, your coach, work hard, remember to improve yourself. But what can you do? Times change, sometimes not for the better. "You know, Henry," he said, "sometimes it takes a little push to make people notice they're living wrong. Maybe I should show these guys that you shouldn't judge age or looks if you haven't really achieved anything yet?" The cleaner smiled slightly. "Well, if you want, you can try. The main thing is not to get into a serious fight. These guys, if they break in, can be unpredictable." Jason looked confidently over to where one of the guys was swinging his fists at a punching bag, while the speakers roared, "Don't worry. I'm in control of the situation. I'll see how they react if I just start training next to them. Maybe they'll gain a little respect." No sooner said than done. Statham went to the lockers where he once kept his training kit. True, the old contents were long gone, but someone had left the old gloves. He checked their condition, still passable, and decided to put them on. It felt like he was back in time, the familiar touch of the skin on his hands, the tension in his wrists, and the slight excitement before his first punch on the punching bag. Only then he did not suspect that he would soon encounter open hostility. Jason headed for one of the punching bags at the back of the gym. No one was working out there, so he could warm up in peace. There was still a mirror hanging on the side, in which the boxer could watch his technique. Looking at his reflection, Statham noticed wrinkles around his eyes, a little gray at his temples. Life goes on, years go by, but inside he felt like the same guy, capable of giving it his all. First, he slowly stretched his shoulders, rotated his body a few times, and remembered his stretching. Then he threw light jabs at the bag. Muscle memory immediately made itself known. The punches were precise, with the right speed and angle. Gradually he sped up, adding crosses and uppercuts to the sequence. The sound of his gloves hitting the bag became increasingly sharp. His eyes, focused on the target, burned with determination. "I still like this," he realized. "Boxing is a part of me." After a while, one of the young boxers, who was standing nearby and chatting with his friends, noticed his brisk combinations. The guy squinted suspiciously, as if he couldn't believe his eyes that the old man could move so technically. He said something to his friends, and they began to turn everyone's attention to Jason. "Hey, Grandpa!" someone shouted. You seem to move pretty well for your age, ha? Jason didn't answer, continuing to work the bag. Each blow was smooth, but he felt like he was straining his tendons hard inside. His gloves were starting to get soaked with sweat, but he didn't feel tired yet. Listen, the same voice added, maybe you could show us a couple of movie tricks? Surely on camera everything is different, but in reality it's hard. More laughter. From afar, Henry watched with alarm, obviously afraid that the boys would provoke a conflict. But Jason remained calm. He understood that they could ridicule him because of banal ignorance. They only see an actor and age. But he was seriously engaged in martial arts and boxing long before his film career. But there was no need to rush to explain this, it was better to let the actions speak for themselves. Just leave him alone, said someone from the group, not too loudly, but quite mockingly. Grandpa will soon run out of steam and leave anyway. Statham stopped and wiped his forehead with a towel. It's okay, he repeated mentally. If necessary, I'll prove to them that the old discipline and strength are still alive in this hall. The denouement came sooner than expected. As Jason walked over to a bench to take a sip of water, one of the loudest of the taunters approached him, the same burly guy who had earlier shouted, "What are you doing here, old man?" He looked to be about 20 years old, tall, with powerful biceps and a tattoo of a fire dragon on his shoulder. He was apparently considered the leader of the group. "Hey, Grandpa," he drawled, puffing out his chest, "I see you've decided to remember your fighting youth. But this isn't a movie set, it's all real. How about a little sparring? Want to measure your strength?" Jason raised his eyebrows. "Sparring? With you? Why do you need it?" The guy grinned. "Well, why? You're spinning around here, showing off your punches. I think it's time to check what you can do against a real young boxer. Let's see, can I put you down in a minute or will it take two?" A few of his buddies murmured approvingly, warming up the atmosphere. Henry, watching nearby, shook his head in alarm, as if trying to say, "Don't agree, they're just trying to humiliate you." But Statham knew that the situation had gone too far, and simply ignoring it would only make these guys more arrogant. "Okay," he said calmly. "Let's try. But remember, a fight is not a show with screams, but a serious thing. If you are ready to take responsibility, go ahead." The guy laughed. "Oh, look confident, huh? Well, now we'll see everything in the ring. Get ready, Grandpa." They headed toward the ring. Several other boxers bustled around, lifting the ropes so that both could enter. Jason took off his coat, remaining in his sports pants and a t-shirt, put on boxing gloves. The tattooed opponent did the same, declaring that 1 minute is enough to throw out the old man. Henry walked up to Statham and whispered quietly, "Please don't get hurt. And remember, these guys are mean." Jason nodded. "Thank you for your concern, but I'll figure it out." The guy, on the contrary, loudly warmed up his friend's attention before the fight, waving his arms. "Look, now I'll crush him with one hook." The elite gathered around the ring came to life. Someone took out a phone to shoot a video. Someone argued that the old man won't last here. The fighters stood in the center of the ring. One of the guys impersonated a referee and said, "So, a fight without protection? Without helmets? Okay, let's go." The bell rang for a draw, but the start was given. The guy, full of self-confidence, immediately rushed forward, intending to bring down a series of hard blows on the old man. But Statham deftly dodged to the side, moving unexpectedly quickly, and then made a short cross in response, catching his opponent on the cheekbone. The crowd gasped. "What are you doing?" The guy muttered, rubbing his cheek, and rushed to attack again, but received dodges and light jabs, each of which was delivered accurately, without wasting any strength. Jason felt that although he was not in perfect athletic shape, his many years of experience and reaction allowed him to confidently control the fight. The guy began to deflate. It turned out that he was not able to carry out high-speed combinations, and there was a lot of aggression, but little use. "Hit him already!" the boys' friends shouted. "Oh, how the old man moves!" someone exclaimed. About 30 seconds later, The opponent's face was covered in sweat. He was exhausted from the unsystematic jerks. Statham made a sharp jerk forward, carried out an uppercut from the right, but holding back the force, only spared the opponent so as not to completely knock his jaw out. The guy staggered, lowered his gloves. "Enough," he muttered. "Where is your promise I'll put you down in a minute?" Jason asked mockingly, but without any malice in his voice. The guy didn't know how to respond, breathing heavily, looking at Statham with blank incomprehension. The crowd around the ring watched in silence, surprised at how easily the grandfather avoided all the attacks. Finally, the self-confident fighter realized that there was no point in continuing and waved his hand. "Okay, that's it. It's time for me to take a break." He stepped out of the ring and his buddies stepped aside, many of them frankly amazed. Henry, standing to the side, almost shed tears of joy. "This is real skill and discipline." Jason, having caught his breath, took off his gloves and looked at those who had just been laughing. There was a deathly silence. But soon one of them made a timid attempt to clap. One by one, the guys began to understand. Before them was not an old man, but a man whose ability could not be erased by the years. "This is a lesson to you," Statham said quietly, addressing everyone rather than a specific opponent. "Age is no indicator of weakness. Respect those who came before you. And learn real boxing, not just building muscle for show." At this point he left the ring. Approaching the cleaner, he smiled. "Well, Henry, I think they'll think about their behavior now. Won't you get bored cleaning?" "Thank you, Jason," he replied, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. "Now I have hope that one of them will think about it, reconsider. Maybe you'll find time to come by sometimes, show me your true spirit?" Jason shrugged. "Maybe. I myself was pleased to remember this place. I hope that everything can be fixed. The main thing is to return respect and discipline to the hall." He changed his clothes and, saying goodbye to Henry, said, "If anything, call me. I'll come to help. And tell those guys, if they want to learn something, I'm ready to give a couple of lessons." As he left, he glanced once more at the photographs on the stand. The past returned for a moment, highlighting how much the right path and mentorship meant to a person. Now he could only hope that this evening would serve as an important lesson for young boxers. Do not judge by appearance and age, because true strength lies in experience, character, and respect.